प्रसार भारती अभिलेखागार की प्रस्तुति सदाबहार सुनहरे दौर का अनमोल खजाना।
The emus were way back near the entrance. I was wrong. Well, he has there's a whole series which, ooh, look, who's that? Oh, but that's fantastic. It's huge. It's a mithun.
This one?
Yeah, that thing there. It's a Himalayan, like a bull. I think they're beautiful. I'd like to be beautiful too. This is all I can say. It's like it's ridiculous, and it's hard to say it because it sounds ridiculous. But I feel a sense of identification. I look at that and I think, yes, I can imagine what it must be like to prowl about, to have whiskers, big whiskers, and to feel when walking through the forest that all the other creatures are, aware of me. I like that feeling. At 5, I wasn't very conscious of what I looked like. I was short and round. I was plump. I was a plump child. I had 2 little pigtails which stuck out at angles. At 16, I think I looked pretty much the same but taller. And I didn't wear my hair in pigtails. I mean, I can stay close to just a description, in which case you won't get the long moan about how dreadful I thought I looked at 16 and all the terrible efforts I made to look different. I won't tell you about that. But I was still fat, and I mean, certainly I thought I was enormous, and I had medium curly hair, which I was constantly trying to straighten, and I wore a lot of makeup whenever when in school, during the school day, we couldn't wear makeup, but any chance that one could, otherwise I would be painting my face. I can remember, for instance, very clearly when we were in Karachi, and I was about, I was 6 years old, and there were lots of other kids, and we all used to draw and cut paper figures out and things like that. I can remember the the discussions we had amongst ourselves about how to draw a nose. It was easy to draw this from the side, but the great challenge was to draw a round face and the nose from the front. And I can remember that discussion. And then one day, it just popped. Then one could look at comics, and in comics, the three-quarter profile, again, you got a clear outline like that. And then, this thing, and you could draw a nose. But the big thing was from the front, because from the front, I can remember the struggle to two little dots, but somehow two little dots wasn't enough, and to get this molding, and to get it repeatedly, that was, one day you can do it. When you draw something, it's like touching it. It's like having possession of it. When you draw, the better you draw it, the better you know it, the better it becomes part of you. And the example that I've given people before is when you go sightseeing, you look at a building, and the building is there and you're here. If you draw it carefully, you touch it from top to bottom. It's a way of feeling your way through the whole building. You get to know each arch, each part of the dome, you understand it, and it is with you forever. It's a way of knowing things.
We see them. Do they see us? We call this bird a kasari. What does it call us? The tiger yawns to show us he's bored, and to air his cutlery. Solemn with the weight of its gravity, the hippo succumbs to slumber. The zen of food for an otter is fish. The chimpanzee greets us with frank delight. Here are relatives close enough to be worth attacking. A fellow visitor to the zoo, looking at the deer, said, "It's a small camel, isn't it?" The deer, looking at the visitor, said, "Nothing." The elephant carries us, like baggage, on a dancer's back. The tune to which the elephant sways is audible only to our gaze.
I can remember a zoo when I was, in a zoo in Geneva where we used to go when I was a small child. And I remember the elephants there seemed to have slightly runny noses, their trunks seemed to be dripping slightly, and talking birds and things like that. But I was a very small child then, and it's just a vague memory. But otherwise, the Delhi Zoo was very important to me. It had just opened when we were living here. Or it had opened fairly recently, and so it was really quite exciting to come to the zoo with the open space, the open plan cages where they're not really behind bars, and to look around, and the fort behind. It was really, really thrilling. I mean, Delhi Zoo used to be for me the most exciting place to come to. And it's only, I feel very sad to hear the stories about animals being mistreated here and so on, because certainly when I was a child, it was the high point. It was a great place to be, and because it was presented as a zoo where animals weren't in cages, it looked like it was a especially good zoo. I think I was about 19 perhaps when I made a trip to Kerala with my mother, and I went at the peak of the monsoon and we stayed for a few days in my the house in which my father had grown up. in a small town called Tellicherry. I like the rain from a distance. I don't like being in the rain. But living in that house and seeing the explosion of greenery, there was a short space of, an open space, and then just banks of green, just writhing, bursting green, and all kinds of shapes, incredible writhing forms of leaves, and mostly just green, the same color of green and a few shades, a few variations. But this profusion and the sense of unbridled vigor was something that just took my breath away. I'm not saying that I liked it. I think I was suddenly made to recognize the power that lies dormant and is always there in nature, but which obviously in the monsoon just can't hold itself in. My mother was a very professional mother. I think she was reasonably strict, and I was afraid of her. Certainly, I was afraid of her at times, but I admired her, and I really I yearned for her praise, her appreciation. It wasn't easy to get a word of praise from her, but not because she was harsh, but because she had high standards. And I think that made a very big difference to me, that it wasn't easy to please my mother. Especially with my work, I had to actually produce something good before my mother would say, yes, that is good, or that's worthwhile. And I think that made a very big difference to my desire to work towards that praise. I think even now I look forward to hearing from her that she has liked something that I have done. My father was in the Foreign Service, so we traveled all through my childhood. I was born in Delhi, and we went to Stockholm for 2 years, Geneva for 3 years, Karachi for 3 years, Delhi for 3 years, Bangkok, Thailand for 3 years. And my parents went to Iran for 2 years, and I went simultaneously. I went to boarding school in Kodaikanal in South India, and after school went to Bombay, went to college in Bombay. The journey my father took to come out of his disadvantaged background. I know that as a young man he did face traditional segregations. There were many areas of life which were sealed away from him because of caste, and it is something that, for me, it has always been. I'm very, very grateful for that journey that he took, because I have never felt it, never been stigmatized, and yet I think it's important to talk about one's background, especially if it has a low caste shadow. Did I feel mixed up with all the traveling? Yes, of course I did. I felt dislocated, and I felt constantly an alien. I remember the first time I went to England, which was much later when I was 21, I realized on that visit that it was the first place I was in where I was surrounded by the language in which I thought, which is English. I don't speak any other language, and it seems I've grown up all my life in countries where English is not the language spoken. So I've always been surrounded by an incomprehensible language and an incomprehensible script, a script that I don't read. And that sense of being alienated has become very natural to me. Now I identify myself with feeling alienated everywhere, and now I'm comfortable with it. But as a child, it was confusing. There was a lot of storytelling. My sisters used to tell me the stories, the films they had seen, and they were very real. And one thing we used to do, which was great fun, was listening to pieces of gypsy music. And we used to make up stories. I mean, if the music were for a film, what would be the events of the film, given the music? And it was great fun to do it, like in reverse, not suiting the music to the film, but the film to the music. There were great tragedies. There would be the flight from the evil oppressor, and I remember in particular there was one piece of music which suggested romantic couples struggling up a waterfall. It could be nothing else. I remember there was a certain phase at which I wrote strange little, not quite fantasies. They were just very, very brief stories, like about 3 or 4 pages long, a quick, brief bit of horror. I did that, and it was a bit like peeking into a dark room to get a fright, and to run out and think, hey, wow, that was artistic, and doing it again, just for fun. Is there some reason that you wanted me to look at Snow White?
Because it's its subtitle.
Oh. Uh-huh. But is this sincere?
You don't like this book.
Yeah. I don't need it. I reach burnout. I disliked most of my school. I felt very much a misfit and confused and lonely. When authority is meaningless, when there are silly rules which don't make sense, like there was a rule in my boarding school that we couldn't talk at breakfast, it just didn't make any sense. And I think when one is an adolescent, and one is trying to get a grip on the world and trying to understand reality, and you're studying so much about cause and effect, it becomes unbearable to find that in your own life there isn't, cause and effect don't seem to work in the same way that they do in your algebra class or in your physics class. It's as if there's one set of rules for the real world and another set of rules for you in school. And if you could understand why you can't walk on that corridor, why you can't talk at breakfast, it's okay. But if there's no explanation, but you will do it, then that, to my mind, that's just completely unbearable. That's very pretty, Monica, with the light falling on the deer. there's a photograph of me with my arms raised, and I think it expresses the sort of child I was. I wasn't inhibited about expressing my feelings. I think as I grew up and I began to realize that expressions of exuberance had to be curtailed, and you had to be polite, and you had to be careful and dignified. I think as I grew up, it translated. I mean, my internal exuberance translated into rebelliousness, a lot of rebellion from 12, 13, 14 onwards. For years, I would say, till I was 32 and 33, I was still rebelling. I think I finally found an outlet for that spirit in my work, so that the rebellions of my adolescence and early adulthood have, I think, finally found an expression in my work. But it's subtle. I think it's under the surface. It's not really. It's not very obvious. Don't despair. This is not all there is to it. When we were in Karachi, and there was a party for Holi that was celebrated in the lawns of our house, which was an embassy house. I had never liked Holi as a festival, and I didn't participate. But I remember that there was a peculiar fervor with the way that it was celebrated that year. There seemed to be hundreds of people who came to the house, who seemed almost hysterical in the way that they were celebrating. I remember it stained the grass on the lawn for weeks after that, as if who had come had been repressed and were expressing much more than just festivity. Now this, I don't know anything. This is just a child's recall. I remember feeling frightened by the power of that celebration. It wasn't fun. It was a kind of frenzy. It was a frenzy. I must have been about 2.5, and I had a fever. And after I woke up, I was aware that the dream was a fever dream. I was in a railway tunnel and being chased by a hippo. It never came close enough that I actually knew that I saw it. It was just thundering behind me, and I knew it was a hippo. So it's not, and it didn't catch up with me. So it was just an endless chase scene going on. And I remember the fear of a chase dream. We all have chase dreams, and it had the classic fear of a chase dream. But it didn't catch up, and I woke up and then became very conscious, felt. The reason for this dream was that I had a fever, and it was an expression of that. I hadn't started to set my dreams right at that age. I think that was sometime later. 6, 7, 8, I could alter the dream by just continuing with it and stay with the dream till I could make it work out. One of the first news events that I remember is the launching of Sputnik. We were in Geneva, and I was probably about 4 years old or 5 years old, and it seemed a thrilling and extraordinary event that something had gone into space. And I'd been told that a little dog called Laika had been launched with Sputnik, and I had seen pictures of Laika, and I asked questions about, I think it was a she, her. And then I remember the terrible sense of sadness and disappointment to hear that Laika wouldn't come back. Laika was up in Sputnik but would die in Sputnik. and it seemed to me very, very tragic at the time. And I guess it is tragic. I did experimental things for myself. I mean, I drew a great deal for myself, and what I drew was characters that I'd read about. I remember reading the Oz books. There's The Wizard of Oz, and then there are some 20 books after that. And I never did like the illustrations. I think that may be one of the other reasons that I drew a lot as a child was if I didn't like or didn't approve of the illustrations which accompanied a text, then I would do my own for myself, and satisfy my own interpretation of the text. I think most people assume that Suki and I are the same person. I will freely confess that Suki began life in 1982 in a strip called Double Talk, which appeared in the Bombay Sunday Observer. At that time, she was definitely based on myself, and the things that happened to me frequently happened to Suki. Down the line, Suki began to take on very much a life of her own, and things that would happen to her certainly didn't happen to me. And I began to feel constrained, trying to force her to maintain a close relationship with me. Oscar, I can't show Suki's childhood, so in a sense, Oscar is the young Suki, though in the strip she is Suki's niece. But when I look at photographs of myself as a child, I can see that there is a certain resemblance between me with my little pigtails and Oscar with her little pigtails and round face. So maybe I'm lurking there somewhere. The pacts that I made as a child towards my grown-up self, I think I have tried to keep to some of them.
And what would those pacts be?
I don't know, it's hard to say. Things, not to betray the things that I liked as a child. Not to be embarrassed about my childhood. Not to be dismissive of the traumas, of the fears and angers and pleasures of my childhood. Not to disregard them, not to shut the door on them. And I guess, the things that I like, I continue to enjoy many of the things that I liked as a child. Even being an illustrator is, in a sense, carrying on my childhood desire to see good work in the books that I read. To some extent, I draw from my childhood self.